Okay, I think we are live now. So, hello everybody,
Hi.
and welcome to the Big Book Club. This is our book for September and October. So we went for something spooky. We went for Our Share of Nights by Mariana Enriquez, which was translated from the Spanish by Megan McDowell. And I guess I should say Happy Halloween as well, to explain why Nathan looks like that.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, yes. So this is Nathan's Nook. Do you want to introduce yourself and your channel and let us know your feelings on big books, your favourite big book?
Okay, yes. I'm going to start by taking this off because I'm not going to do the entire live with this on. Sorry. But hi, I'm Nathan. I read books because reading is sexy, and if you're not reading, you're not sexy. Big books. I'm I'm a tiny book person. I'm a tiny book person. But like I'll throw in a big one, a chunker, every once in a while, just to like, I like to keep the waves high and low. So yeah. My favorite big book, I think will have to be, I think it's a Goldfinch.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you
Yeah,
done the Goldfinch?
I haven't, but I do have it here. I've not read it, but it is here on my shelf, so might have to do one for next
I'm
year.
I'm amazed with like how many big books you have. It's just like,
Yeah.
do they like, I mean, obviously they take up space, right?
I don't have that many books actually. I'm not a huge hoarder of books. This is my only
Oh,
bookcase. The
okay.
only books in the house are here except cookbooks. So
Oh,
yeah,
lovely.
but I do have several large ones. I like reading a big book. Gives you time to like really get involved and get into it with the characters. I think growing up reading loads of Victorian literature, you get very used to reading big books.
Right, right.
I don't read that many tiny books. That's not poetry. Poetry is like most of the tiny books I read are poetry. So anyway,
Okay.
this month we are talking about Our Share of Nights by Mariana Enriquez, as I said at the beginning. So this is kind of a horror book. Well, it is a horror book, but we'll talk about how horror it is when we get into the discussion. But it is about Juan and Gaspar, who are father and son, and they are from Argentina. And it goes from the early 80s through to the late 90s over the course of their lives. And Juan is a medium. He can talk to the dead, and he is related somehow to this occultist group. I can't remember what they call themselves. The Order group called the Order.
Yeah.
And he is trying to get Gaspar away from them at the beginning. At the beginning, his wife has died, and he is trying to get Gaspar out of this order because we know that they are powerful and they might take control of him. And it covers many years, lots of strange, weird goings on, and also kind of touches on the dictatorship in Argentina in the 1980s, queer coming of age, and like being gay and in Argentina at the time, and also like after the dictatorship, the political effects of that as well. So covers a lot in this large book, though it's not our largest. But yeah, we'll get into discussing this now. So Nathan, what was your overall opinion of the book? Kieran.
Hello, Kieran. Good to see you here. And I thought, I'm gonna be honest. I wish it was cut down a bit. It could have been a tiny book. It could have been a short story. But no, I like when you put the book into perspective and how you described it, it packs a lot. It's a coming of age story. It's also political, social critique on Argentina as well. And yeah, and you have the horror elements, and it's kind of amazing, I will say, quite ambitious for Mariana to uh, come from short stories and then this just be her debut book, and it's a chonker. It's a chonker. So I will say quite ambitious. I will say early impressions, I was getting strong Stephen King vibes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because we have like kids, teens, and it's the coming of age aspect, and then horror on top of that. It's like Stand By Me, It, and yeah. So, but I'm gonna admit, kind of disappointed with some of the horror elements. I thought this was gonna be, I thought I was gonna get scared.
Yeah, I think definitely more creepy than scary. I can see Happy
Yes.
Knitter here says they're on page 422. So if we're going to do spoilers about the ending, we need to let them know so they can leave. But yeah,
Oh,
so yeah, I
okay.
agree. Definitely, there were moments where I felt quite uncomfortable. There's a lot of like body horror. Is the most of the horror I would say
Yes.
is quite like off the body, and those things did make me feel a little creepy. And there were moments that like were heading towards more true horror, like in the haunted house kind of aspect of the book, I thought could have been really scary, and it just never really. It just sort of cut out and then jumped, like they just left, or they it just like it never really went quite as far as I wanted it to go in terms of the horror. I think it was much more discomfort and creepy, which I would say. Have you read her short stories?
I was gonna ask you, so like when you read her short stories, do they
Yeah.
like what kind of horror does she normally focus on?
It's similar. It's very political. She talks a lot about Argentina's history and the dictatorship and kind of the ghosts, like collective ghosts haunting the country, is kind of a thing that reoccurs a lot in her short stories. They are definitely more like uncomfortable and the body and like disgusting than they are sort of terrifying. But then I've never read a book that I've been terrified of. Like I've never really had that experience in a book. So I don't know. Like for me, yeah, discomfort happens, and like yeah, I was definitely grossed out. The box of eyelids, I think we talked about on Instagram, that was real creepy. But in terms of horror, like being afraid, it's not something I've ever experienced with a book anyway. So I don't know necessarily.
Oh, I see. What would you say would be like your scariest read?
Scary read, I don't know. Like I've only recently got into horror, and it's more at the kind of like literary end that's not like out to shock you as much. I
Oh,
guess
I
there's
see, I
more
see.
like using horror to explore grief or to explore political ideas rather than like super out there. Yeah, there are books that have made me the most uncomfortable, which aren't even horror, like The Discomfort of Evening by Lucas Reineveld. That made me so
Mhm.
physically uncomfortable. I had to like leave the book in a different room because I was just so uncomfortable. But no, I don't know about horror. What about you? What's the like scariest book?
Scariest book, I think, was I was 16 at the time,
Hmm.
and I read Blatty's The Exorcist before watching
Sorry,
the
you broke up
movies.
there. Didn't
Oh, I read
sorry.
Blatty's The Exorcist,
Hmm.
yeah, at 16 before I watched the movie, and that like terrified me. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, that as well as some of Stephen King's books as well.
Hmm.
I think there are moments in that. Well, I also read them when I was quite young,
Hmm.
so when I was quite impressionable.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are like terrifying, scary moments in that book that like gave me nightmares.
Right.
Um, yeah, a sleepy teen. But yeah, I knew there were gonna be ghosts.
Hmm.
And with the culty bits, I knew that maybe it was going to be more atmospheric. Did you get a lot of the atmospheric horror elements? Did you enjoy those bits, sort of like in the haunted house moments,
Hmm.
um, and yeah, the body horror elements?
Yeah, I
What did you
think
think of?
I can. I mean, I think the most thing I think about this book is that it's like uneven, because I think that sometimes the atmosphere was really great and really worked, and then sometimes it felt like it was being too blatant and the atmosphere didn't quite hold up. Like it went too far. The bits where this is quite near the beginning when they go to the underground tunnels in the like big house, and that she's keeping all those children there and like torturing them. That made me feel very uncomfortable and definitely felt like a sense of dread that something terrible was going to happen. But the bits that were like the the ritual where the darkness comes and starts cutting people open and stuff. It felt like it went like it could have gone campy at that point, and I think that would have been fun, but it would have been like a different kind of book. But it was like teetering on the edge, and so it felt a bit like Tim Curry could have turned up in this situation, and I wouldn't have been that surprised. So yeah, I think sometimes it was like it went to the point where it didn't feel as like full of dread anymore. It felt more like it's just I don't know. Maybe I just detach when it becomes so like obvious and so like blatant. But yeah, what about you? How did you feel about the atmosphere?
Yeah, I also felt quite detached from everything. I think it was also because of the structure of the book.
Mm,
Um, just the way that, because the way that we start in part one and part two and part three, I think we're fine. I thought like the exposition was really great. And then sort of like the jumps in time and then like going back in time, it I think didn't necessarily work because it felt very clunky
hmm
in this like size of the book and also so many different storylines and what she was trying to achieve. This feels like it's better like made for like a mini series. Like there's something I will say like her prose is like very cinematic and
hmm
I can definitely imagine this as like a film or like a mini series, but the way that like the structure of the book is set up and especially like what is it? What is it? Part four, where uh, it's Rosario and Juan, and
hmm
it focuses on their love story. It's these going back and forth moments where I feel like it works better in terms of like a mini series.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I can see what you mean.
yeah,
Especially if everyone's described as being very hot, so it would work for television. um,
exactly.
yeah,
And I'd
I.
watch it.
Yeah, and then the creepy like atmosphere I think would work better because a lot of the time I find like visual stuff a lot scarier than like reading it.
Yeah.
Personally, because like then I'm not in control of what's happening, whereas when I'm reading it, I'm like in control because it's in my own head. If that makes any sense. Anyway, the yeah, the jumping in time period I found a bit like strange as well, and I think that she clearly had like ties. She wanted to like link everything up. There was a reason she was telling the story in this way, and it did make sense. But I felt like, especially in the time jumps, particularly the period, the bit with Rosario, so part four and part six, the bit with Rosario, and then the bit after after Adela's gone in the house. Both of those bits, I felt like she had decided she wanted to like bring in more of the politics that in those periods, and that's when it lost momentum and pace, and those were the points where I felt like I put the book down and then didn't come back for a while because I felt like it didn't have the draw. Like we were before we went into Rosario's bit was the bit where they went into the house, the kids went into the house, the Stephen King
Right.
part, and that was like so tense, and I was so like wanting to know what was happening, and then we changed, and at the start of that I was like, oh, that's good because now I kept on like, but then it lost me again because we went into like, oh, we're just taking LSD at parties in London in the 1960s and David Bowie's there, which is like fun, but it's not horror anymore, and that did build up again, but it did feel like the tension, she struggled to maintain tension throughout the book, and I think that tension is important for horror, because yes, you need the respite, you can't just be constantly at like high alert, but I think that once you've started to get into that tense place, that's what's propelling you forward. And when we've gone back in
Right.
time and they are new characters, ostensibly, like Juan and Esteban are in earlier bits, but they're different in the past than they are in
Yeah.
the present. Um, and whilst there were, yeah, feel like it was like a whole new book, like a whole new thing that we were exploring that was like along the same lines, but it was almost like that could have been taken out of this book, and then she could have just written a prequel to this book with that bit in. Like it was like not necessary. It didn't
Right.
like. This is kind of spoilery for the end, but it does. The bit that happens, the bit where they go in through the door in that part, does mirror what happens at the end. But I don't think we needed to know that because I kept being like, "Oh, is Rosario going to be inside there? Like, is there something that we're going in there to find?" And that's why we needed to know the past to know, like, because the whole of the beginning, they're like, "Where's Rosario? Why can't Juan talk to Rosario?" I don't know. Like, who knows? He just can't. Like, I felt like there
Yeah.
were moments that didn't quite like connect over the course of the novel, and possibly that's because she's not used to like sustaining things for so long.
Right. And we were speaking a little bit before coming into the live, but yeah, it's interesting to see her come from short stories and into something quite big like this. And I think in terms of structure, in the way that the parts are formed, they definitely feel like their construction within the short story form
Mm.
just sort of bled out and stretched out into a series of short stories, more so than what feels like a novel per
Mm,
se. And I think that's also, as you said, like why it feels so uneven as well. But yeah, like I needed more tension. I needed more tension near
mm,
the end, and it just wasn't there. But I do understand. I think we'll talk about this because I thought I was I didn't know quite a lot about the dictatorship
mhm.
um, within Argentina during the 80s, and I thought that was really interesting. We'll get there, but um, yeah, it just like the time jumps just made everything feel uneven, and there was definitely sort of an investment in her characters. Like there's definitely a lot of love that she put into her characters, but I didn't feel it. There wasn't like a strong emotional resonance. Like they're all detestable characters, but like I think that's fine. Like you can do that, but there has to be some kind of empathy. Like I needed to relate, and I think some of the coming of age elements just didn't hit the mark for me in terms of like connecting with Gaspar.
Mm. I
Um,
actually preferred Pablo.
which at least, what was that?
I preferred Pablo. I was like, this is more interesting. Can we just follow Pablo now?
Yeah, I was just like, oh, gosh. But yeah, it's through these many different storylines and um, investments in the political context and um, storylines of other characters where I just felt like it was a little bloated and
Mm.
uneven. But yeah, I was gonna ask who is your favorite character? It's Pablo.
Pablo or Esteban, I like, or Stephen
Hmm.
Esteban, whatever you want to call him. I
Right.
like both. Both of them were interesting, like characters, and they are such side characters. Like I feel like Juan especially wasn't really a character. Like it was interesting because obviously they talk about him being a tool for the order, and like he's just for them to use. And I feel like he did come across that way like he doesn't really have agency or what he wants, like any sort of desire. Except, well, he's trying to get away from the order for his son, but I feel like him as himself, I don't really know anything about him, like who he is or anything. He's just like this angry man who talks to ghosts. Like that's the extent of his character. And whilst his existing did make the book more interesting, like once that was gone, it kind of, I don't want to spoil things, but like towards the end, once he was gone, then I feel like the book kind of lost its lodestar. Like I didn't know where it was, what it was focusing around so much. But him as a character, yeah, I didn't think it was that interesting. But Esteban, I thought could have been more interesting, and Rosario as well. Actually, when we had Rosario's perspective, I thought her as being a member of the order, as being from the family, and like I think that could have been explored more. But it was definitely interesting that they had a character who was so invested in this, whereas from the outside, as a reader's perspective, it seems completely like you can't really understand why they are so invested in like torturing children all the time. Even though they hate each other, they're still like invested in this thing. I don't know necessarily why. I know there's like immortal life, I think is what they're going for, but yeah, I thought it
Right.
was
I had to I had to read the blurb again to
interesting.
understand like what was the point of the order and like what did
Yeah,
they want to achieve and everything. But yeah, like eternal life, which
I think it's
which is
supposed to be
interesting.
like sort of a what is it called? They call like high demand religion, like an
Mm,
occult extreme version of what it's like to be like a Mormon, or like in something like that's high demand, because of the way that like it treats other people, but obviously with a lot more violence and like murder and stuff, um, to make it horror. But I think it's probably associated with that. Maybe something like the Catholic Church. I assume the Catholic Church in Argentina did terrible things. They did everywhere, so we assume. Um, and there is a kind of touch of the occult about the Catholic Church as well. So maybe it's to do with
yes.
that. I did wish, actually, I'll ask you about your favorite characters in a minute, but I just had a thought and I don't want to forget it. If I wish that the occult and the like politics of Argentina had been like woven together a bit more, or like the relationship
Yes.
between those two things, because like yes, the family are on the side of the dictatorship because it's how they can keep money or whatever. But I felt like it could have been much more tightly connected and like connected to the history of colonialism in Argentina, because these are English people in Argentina, like connected to what led to this dictatorship and the power, because they're said to be like powerful and like have their fingers in all the power around the world or whatever. I just felt like it could have been, but it was just like the dictatorship's happening, but we're more focused on this family. Like I felt like it could have been better connected.
Right. See, and then it was like, was it a translation error, or was it, um, yeah, I don't know. It like I also wish that like those parts were more connected, because I was reading up on, I was thinking a lot more about like the order and what it is, and it's supposed to like it's characterized after the like aristocratic classes of
Mm-hmm.
Argentina. I think there's a mention where uh, the Argentinian family of the order is half Creole, half English, right? And during that time, aristocratic like landlords were commercially associated with the UK and helped subdue sort of the country in like a semi colonial situation with military regimes as well. And I just wish like that was better connected, because it just felt very um, like foreign information, and
Mm.
I didn't know how to connect the two. So I was wondering if it was like error in translation, or if uh, Mariana was just juggling again with like way too many different things to pay close attention to this. Um, but yeah, I also wish that they were better formed, but like, but when you read up on it, it's like
Mm.
really quite fascinating. I had no idea that.
I wonder if maybe it's written for an Argentine audience, and so maybe the like subtle connection there would have been more obvious if you were like familiar with
Right, right.
Argentina. Because I knew some things about the dictatorship, but I didn't know about the landlords or anything like that, and their relationship. I knew more about the CIA's relationship with it than them. But yeah. So yeah, what
Right.
about you, character? What do you think of the characters in general, and the formation of the characters?
Um, yeah, I really couldn't connect with any of them. I didn't really have a favorite. I think I lost interest in all of the characters until Olga came in.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was like an interesting spin on the story and a reframing of it. And um, I think that like Olga's involvement in the story really clicked in, because I didn't quite understand why any of this was going on. But when Olga came in, sort of the social political stuff uh, like clicked for me, and I was like, oh, I see what's going on. I understand like how the order is involved with sort of the social political sphere of Argentina at the time, and the investigative journalism that she was doing.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, they're all pretty unlikable characters, if you ask
yeah,
me.
yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
No spoilers, but I will say, like Rosario's the mother figure. I loved the arc for that
Mm.
Mariana created, and how um we're not doing spoilers, right?
I think we can now. I think we'll just say now we're doing spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, leave. So let's go for
Oh, okay.
let's go for
Okay.
it.
Okay. Spoilers. But yeah, just like Rosario as the mother figure, and
Mm.
how um at the very beginning, we're sort of led to believe that like, oh, mom's gone, and there's all this love as well. But really, she has this son to sort of. No, I feel bad for spoiling, because I
No,
think
no,
it's like a really.
it's we normally do spoilers, but normally it's a full spoiler discussion. So
Oh, oh, okay, okay.
go
But
ahead.
yeah, I mean, that was pretty freaky. I will say that was freaky. The way that she wanted to use Gaspar in a sense to put like Juan's body in him, or
Yeah,
like use him as like a vessel
Hmm.
and that like what is that incest? It's just I thought it was yeah,
Yeah,
it was really really
which kind
interesting.
of showed how
Um,
like the order and what they're looking for was more important to her than like family or whatever. Because she says like, well, once they put my husband's soul inside my son, he's not going to be my husband anymore. Like it's inside my son. Um, but she's
yeah,
like, yeah, that's cool though, for you to like basically kill my son because he won't exist anymore. Um, yeah,
yeah,
she's yeah. I guess the like there is a lot of, despite the fact that this book is very heavily focused on male characters, like it's very male heavy. There's a lot of like monstrous feminine around the edges. Like most of the female characters have something horrific about them. There's something like the twisted mother figure who's like willing to sacrifice her child for immortal life seems to be pretty much all of them mothers. And the three women who are like the head of the order at the end, I really liked seeing them at the end. I thought that was like cool, fun, like horror, where they were like creepy old crones being like, we must torture this boy to get what we want. And
yeah,
like one of them wears a mask and glasses because she's got no eyelids and no lips. She's just really creepy looking.
yeah,
I enjoyed that. I thought the ending was super rushed, actually. Like we've had all this build up, so much like swimming and finding lost dogs and like nonsense that really wasn't necessary, and so much like political stuff related to like the police and protests and stuff that was interesting, but again wasn't linked to the horror in any way. And then at the end, they like get him back, and he has to get out, and then he takes them into the room, and then yeah, they all die.
yeah.
Everyone dies.
Everyone dies.
That's really good
Yeah.
police.
Guess what, everybody? Everyone dies.
Everyone dies.
That's a book. Um, but yeah, I also felt it was a bit rushed.
Mm,
Which like it's such a letdown because it's like here I am crunching through so many pages to get to
mm,
what? To get to what?
mhm. Yeah.
Um, yeah. But no, I thought that was really interesting, the idea of like the monstrous uh feminine and uh I I think like this year has been a lot of books have been about like motherhood and like
Mm.
mothering and the mother. So it was really interesting to see this like different take on uh what a mother should do or
Mm.
what a mother wants
Look,
to do.
like, you know, we've
Um
had mothers turning into dogs and owls and all sorts for the past few years. Like,
yeah,
uh, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I think I get quite bored of books about motherhood personally because I feel like they're all very similar. It's like how I feel about dystopia. I'm just like, are you telling me the same thing again? I don't necessarily feel that interested in it. But yeah,
right.
especially because the mother was like removed. We never see the mother's relationship with her son, like in this book. She never really spends any time with him, and she even doesn't really seem to like him very much. Like when she is a mother, she doesn't seem to care for him very much. And it's much more like Juan's love for Gaspar, whilst violent and twisted, is he definitely seems to feel an interest in his son, and like how much of that is thinking back to his childhood and how it was taken away from him because he was captured and like taken from his parents and made to be a medium and tortured and stuff. And so he's trying to like, is it love for his son or is it trying to give himself another life, if that makes sense? Like, even though he doesn't want to be put into his son, there is always that, it kind of follows that idea of parents like living vicariously through their children and his wanting to like look after his son in the way that he never experienced for himself, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I think that's exactly what Mariana was going for.
Mm.
Also like um relating to trauma as well.
Mm.
That relationship between um, Gaspar and Juan is really fascinating because it's like it really makes you question like can can we cut our line of heritage? Like what part of our traumas can we exercise and move on from, or is it something that is continuously innate generations after generations? And um, when you look at that relationship between them, and then involve the social political commentary as well,
Mm.
it's really frightening. Like um, this familial trauma, but also um, the trauma of the country.
Mm.
Does it follow? And I think that's what makes this book a worthwhile read. um, in terms of story, while also having it be like a very creepy, eerie book. And yeah, I when I like finished it, I was like, meh. That was a big meh with the rushed ending. But like when I sat down to actually think about like what the book was doing,
Mm,
I mean, it could have definitely been done in shorter pages, but
mm,
it actually, yeah, surprised me, I think,
mm.
in the end.
I
Yeah.
think the thing that
So then,
like in oh sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna ask, so how, what do you think happens to trauma, and does it follow generations after? And are we able to just like sever ourselves from
Well, no,
that?
I don't think anyone can sever themselves. I think that's wishful thinking. Like you cannot get outside of the context in which you were raised. It's entirely impossible. And the context in which you were raised is shaped by the people who raised you, who are shaped by the context in which they were raised. So like, it's kind of impossible to get out of context. It's like people who think they don't have an ideology. Like you can't get outside of ideology. You can just recognize it. And I think the same is true for trauma. You can recognize it and I guess work on the ways that it affects you negatively. You can't get away from it. It is like you can't get away from yourself. Like you can't get out of your own head. Like so you can't get away from the things that have happened to you and that has happened in your past either. No, I don't think you can get away from trauma. And I do think it is going to have shaped you in many ways, whether that's like in terms of mentally, or even the stuff about like how people of Ashkenazi Jewish heritage often have more autoimmune conditions, and it might somehow be linked to the way that the like trauma in the past changes your DNA and stuff. That stuff kind of I don't think I fully understand it, but that stuff is blows my mind a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, it's a vicious cycle
Mm.
and continually innate. But
Yeah.
yeah, what the hell do we do with all this trauma?
I think you just have to learn to live with it.
Right, right. And then everyone dies at the end.
And then everyone dies at the end,
Yeah,
which is always true.
yeah, that's the book. That's the book.
Yeah, so the thing that plot-wise that surprised me most in this book is a very little point, but when it came back at the end, because it was right from the very beginning, I was like, oh my god, was when Pablo's lover turned out to be the photographer that Juan has sex with right at the beginning of the book. Like, I
Yeah,
was like, oh my god, this guy is back. And there was that
yeah,
picture
and
of them.
yeah. And is it the doctor comes back again near the end of the book as well? It's just very interesting how she like brings back tiny little things
Mm,
and puts it back in the end as if to form this sort of like full circle. I
mm,
was reading up on like a couple of reviews on the books, and I think one person put it perfectly where it's essentially like a giant fogged up mirror, and you're just waiting for the fog to just slowly show the image of everything.
mm,
Um, maybe too slow, but it's definitely very interesting to see how all the tiny little pieces come together
mm.
like that. Yeah,
I do wonder though if that
but
was more superficial, like the superficial things come back, but some of the bigger plot threads are left a little loose and aren't quite tied up neatly, which I don't think necessarily has to happen in like a more atmospheric book like this. A lot of the time you can be left with questions. But I think when something's so heavily hinted and so like integral to the first third of the book, specifically I'm talking about when Rosario's like death or disappearance or what's happened there, for it to, it's kind of tied up. We get a throwaway line from his grandma being like, I ordered her death. But like, it's not very satisfactory, particularly when you're supposed to be able to talk to the dead. Like, it's not particularly,
yeah,
I didn't find that particularly satisfying in terms of the ending.
yeah, uh, yeah. I do feel like it was a bit superficial in the way that everything sort of. Okay, that's a big question though. Like, do you like when everything is tied up in the end? Like, do you like having all the questions answered
I don't
in
usually,
terms of like plot points?
I don't usually read super plotty books. So like, plot is like something that I haven't formed full opinions on, I feel like, because I'm just not really I don't read a lot of genre fiction. I don't read a lot of books that follow that formula. So yeah, I'm not sure. But I think it can be left ambiguous if it feels like that's the way the book was set up. Like if it feels like the ambiguity is part of the world the book is built and part of the like structure of the book, it's been built for ambiguity, then that works. But if the ambiguity feels like a cop-out, then I feel like it doesn't work. And that's obviously always going to be subjective. Like it's not something that I can define why it feels like a cop-out. I think it's because she was so present through so much of the book. And I feel less like it was a cop-out about Alina, who they were like searching for again, and they were like, is she going to come out of this house? She never did, because that felt more like it was about trauma and about like their reaction to this loss of their friend, who was, of course, like, she wasn't kidnapped, but it was a mirror of the kidnappings and the disappearances that happened in Argentina, and it was a mirror of so many people who were disappeared, because that's like the pit, the death pit, is all these people who have been disappeared, and they're like, there's more people here than the people who died. So the people that we know died here. So yeah, I felt like it made more sense that was left a bit more not fully wrapped up. We just had to accept that she was gone. Whereas I felt like in terms of the mother, it felt more like it was just a throwaway line at the end, was the way she chose to wrap up that story. And I think, I don't know, if she'd left that a bit more ambiguous, less clear why that Kuang was looking for her and he couldn't find her, and if that had been more ambiguous to begin with, then I think I would have felt more satisfied with the ambiguity of the ending.
Yeah, agreed. I think like for moments like that, I would love the ambiguity to sort of flourish the story, but like I wish, yeah, there was still certain moments where I was just like, why is this happening? Like the powers, I still don't know how the powers work. Like, what's going on there? And like just stuff like that where it goes unanswered. I'm just like, well, there it is. But yeah, like by the end, I think I was like a bit, no, well, throughout the book, I think I was just sort of frustrated. I was interested, but frustrated with not knowing a lot of the elements and having no context for things, and then having it like show up in the end and just like be this like giant collage, this giant like Jackson Pollock, and I can see everything by the end. But yeah, still don't know how the powers work, unfortunately.
Yeah, I feel like Gaspar should have had powers, but like Juan stopped him having powers. But then like, I don't know, I was like waiting for something to happen with him, for him to be able to do stuff and like know stuff about his past, because he clearly had them as a child. I felt like, I don't know, we're left in the dark, and as Gaspar is in a lot of ways, we're like discovering things with him, and it feels strange because we've seen so much before, we've been able to see so much that Gaspar didn't see. So why can we only know as much as he knows? Like it didn't seem to like line up for me. I felt like we should have been more aware. But yeah, I'm always like way more critical than positive. It's always hard for me to like talk about the things I did like about the book. But like I didn't hate this book. Like I did enjoy aspects of it. I found it very, the creepy bits I thought were done well, and like the tension in those moments when it was creepy really made me like want to keep going, want to keep turning the page, and want to know what was going to happen. I think she did a good job of that. I think that it was interesting, like looking at the dictatorship. I thought it was very lightly done, which I think worked for this book. Like it wasn't super deep in the detail of what the experience of people like Luis, who was like a rebel fighter. We don't know much about that, but I think it let us know something about his character. It was quite a good way of like showing his character, and there was kind of that class element as well, the class difference between Rosario's family and Juan's family. But yeah, there were things I did enjoy about this book, and I did also think that like the coming of age and Pablo's character, his experience coming of age as like a gay boy in 90s Buenos Aires. I thought that was a different book, but an interesting book at the same time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, we're not here to bash the book. But looking at it like technically, and it's like size and what it's trying to achieve, it's yeah, it may come off as critical. But yeah, I also enjoyed it. Like I especially enjoyed like all the haunted house moments. Like
Mhm.
that was like really fascinating. And again, like Mariana just has like a very cinematic eye and all the details are there and I just love um yeah, just sort of the atmosphere. Yeah, it was like I turned pages. And
Mhm.
I also loved like the readability of it all as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, like when the creepy stuff happened, it was creepy. It
Hmm.
was creepy. But yeah, it like makes me want to um turn to her short stories.
Mm.
Because like if she can do that, within a large text like this, I can't imagine like how much fun
Mm.
it must be to zip through her short stories.
Yeah.
Which collection of hers did you read?
I read Things We Lost in the Fire, which I do have here somewhere, but it's
Okay.
not that. And I really enjoyed it. Like it is so, it has all the creepy elements and the darkness and the politics, but like lightly there in the background. There's one that's a haunted hotel that had been used by the army during the um, dictatorship that was really good and really interesting, and one about a neighbor, and she's convinced there's something in her neighbor's house, and so she goes to her neighbor's house when he's not there, and it's really creepy and really, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I like the way she writes horror. I think I enjoy it because it's quite matter of fact. Like she's not being too floral in terms of her writing of the horror. She allows it to like stand on its own, but at the same time, it's like it's always dark. Like it's always hard. You can't see the periphery. You're not like given the whole picture, and so that allows your brain to like build its own opinions in the space and like make yourself more creeped out than you would be otherwise. And she's also very good at making creepy body things, because I think some people,
Yes.
it doesn't work for me when they do body stuff, but for some reason she just gets to the exact thing that's the most like disgusting. I don't know how she does it.
Yes. What was your favorite body horror moment in the book?
Oh, the mouth when he cut her mouth off, like her lips off, and her teeth came out. Because we'd already been in a tunnel full of mutilated small children. That was already creepy. But something about like her not being able to close her mouth anymore made me really
Mm,
uncomfortable. There's something really
yes.
disgusting about that. Especially when it comes back later that like the other place is a mouth, and so it's like she's now like gaping. Yeah, I found that really grim and difficult. And then also the field of torsos, the field of
Oh
torsos
yeah.
with no arms
That's
and no
right.
heads, like tombstones but with nipples, and like boobs, like the descriptions of the different types of torsos. I found that yeah, uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
Eddie,
I
actually,
could
the
I could
short.
almost feel it texturally too. And I was
Mm,
just like, ugh. Yeah.
yes. What about you? What was your creepiest bit?
Oh, I think I told you it was the baby arm.
Oh, the
That
baby
baby
arm.
arm and
Yeah,
then
the baby arm, the septic baby
yeah.
arm. Mm,
Yes, yes. That image stayed in my head for a bit.
yeah.
Was it the collection of eyelids as well?
Mhm,
I thought was great. But yeah, like just yeah, the body horror stuff is like really cool.
mm,
Really grotesque and yeah, I'm really excited to look at her short stories.
mm,
Um, but it's interesting to write like disgust of the body within this context versus I think like the way Otessa Moshfegh might write about the body and its
mhm,
horrors. Um, like to see horrific moments of the body in Our Share of Night is makes you like really think like, wow, what is this? Like, what is all of this? And what do I keep? What do I give? And like, what do I lose? Whenever I think about like the ghosts within the stories, and
mm,
also just like wanting to go into another body. Um, like I what do you lose? Like Juan, if Juan had gone into Gasper's body, like what would that be?
Mm, yeah, especially because one Gaspard was still a child at the time. Like, so you're putting this giant adult man into a child. Like,
Yeah,
how would that have felt? And but also like he was sick and Gaspard was not. So what would it felt like for him to have a heart that worked? That would
right.
have, yeah. But it didn't really go there. But yeah, I think Moshfegh is normally discussed at what the body can do, like the things the body does, whereas Enriquez is more is the what the body is, like the parts of the body like dissected and separated out into its component parts, and what is like now this is no longer connected to a person. What's our feeling to this piece of body? Which I think is a difference between the two. Like Enriquez's bodies are dismembered, whereas Moshfegh, it's much more about like bodily functions and fluids and things. I think
Right, right.
she
What the
needs a
body
living body.
does. Yeah. But yeah, I think that will stay with me. The baby arm.
Mm.
Um, can't get it out of my head. Yeah.
Actually, the baby that the one that stuck with me that I've just remembered is the small child that they were turning into this specific thing that had a name that I can't remember what the name is, but they like broke its leg and put its leg through its ribs and like so its hips were in
Oh, yeah.
like to yeah like cut its cheeks open or something. I can't remember, but that was really disgusting. Like the mutilated babies, those were grim.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if like if this was ever adapted,
Mm.
um, what the rating would be, first of all, but also what they would include.
Yeah.
But yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, it should be adapted. I think there are rumors
Are
that
there?
it's going to be adapted soon. Yeah, for
Will it be Spanish
Netflix. But I
language?
think what was that?
Do you reckon they'll do it in Spanish language, like in Argentina?
That's the thing. So apparently to film in Argentina is a lot more expensive than to film in like other countries, and that's why there's a hold on it. Um, I'll link the interview where she
Mhm.
discusses it, but uh, yeah, to film in Argentina, it costs like a buttload of more money than it should, compared to like other countries, and that's why there's been a hold on it. But like,
Interesting.
she's got a cinematic eye. Like, I can really see it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, Field of
Yeah, I'd be
Torsos.
interested
I
to
am
see if
ready
they
to
do
see
it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'd struggle more with it watching it than reading it. I felt like I'd be more horrified. I don't know. It depends how they did
Okay.
it.
Yeah. So I was gonna ask you, like, so when you read horror books, do um you can control like what you're reading, but like
Mhm.
when you're watching a horror movie, is it a different story?
Yeah, so I think it's more. So horror movies fall into like two categories for me. They either make me so uncomfortable or I'm bored. Like I don't have any like in between feelings about them. So I think it's probably just the way they do tension or whatever that really gets to me because I'm very easily made tense, but I'm not very easily disgusted or freaked out. So like if you show me something really violent and brutal, it's not really going to affect me. Whereas if it's like creepy, I think I don't know. It depends how it works. But also because I only ever watch horror with other people and they won't let you stop it. So like you can't like pause
Mm,
it.
yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's probably what it is. Whereas with reading, like because you can just not you can just choose to read it as words and not do anything else in your brain. Like not have images if you don't want to.
Interesting.
Or at least like that's how I do it.
Oh, oh, that's really interesting. For me, I they're like, what's that line from iCarly? Reading is like, you know,
What's that line
like
from Icon?
it's from like when she's who was it? It was Sam. And she was like, "Wow, reading is so cool. It's like like movies in my head.
Right.
Reading is like movies in my head." And I was just like, "Wow, that's a really good way of putting it." Because like when I read, it's so visual for me.
Okay.
Um, yeah, So I like reading and also watching any horror stuff. I'm like affected.
Mm.
Yeah. But so then like what's the scariest movie you've seen?
I haven't watched that many horror films, so I'm not like. I remember the first time I watched. Is it called Hole? Where they go like caving and there's like weird humanoid creatures in the hole.
I haven't seen that one. Yeah,
Okay,
but
yeah. The
I
first
I
time
know
I
what
watched
you're talking
it, that
about.
freaked me out, and then my friends wanted to watch it a lot, and it kind of lost all power after the second or third watching. I was like, I know what's going to happen, but there's a pickaxe in the eye situation in that really, like, I could not handle that. I think eyes and fingernails are the things that creep me out the most with like visually watching them. I can't handle it. Like there's like a scene in Lost where they torture someone by putting bamboo shoots under their fingernails. Ugh,
Mm,
no, I can't
yeah,
handle it. But yeah, I've not seen any of the big
yeah.
ones. I've seen The Shining, but I didn't find that scary. Um, yeah. What about you? What's the scariest? What freaks you out?
Ooh. Oh, recently I watched Talk to Me.
Mm.
It's a um it's about talking to the dead.
Uh,
But it's like a coming of age teen story where they have this like hand, and when you hold on to the hand, you can essentially speak to the dead. The dead occupies your body for like um 60 seconds or something, and yeah, uh, one of the possessions goes way too far,
mm,
and yeah, that was pretty scary. I think also because like the sound design was there
mm.
too. Like so it was just I think sound is like really scary within movies, like when done right.
Yeah, even
Um,
like I saw the woman in white, or the woman no, the woman in black. The woman in black on the at the theatre, not the movie theatre, like the theatre in London, and it's like two men are the only actors in it. Um, well, also the woman in black, she's there as well. But there's ostensibly there's only these two men. There's no set design. There's just lighting and sounds, and it's so well done. Like that was creepy. I think also it being physically there is a bit like creepier as well. Like being in person with the horror going on was must be quite difficult to make theatre horror, but I think it worked with the ghost story.
yeah, yeah. It's all those tiny little details that like really make it. But I want to go back. So fingernails and eyes, those are like so specific.
I think it's like that
Because
detail
like
horror.
texturally,
Mm.
mm,
Yeah, rather than like I don't know. Yeah, those ones are the ones that get me. I don't know why they get me, but they do. Like I can't. Oh, the other one I remember that we watched was it's another like creature underground story. Maybe that's what the horror that works for
is
me
that your
is
thing?
creatures
Is
underground.
that
It's
your
like
thing?
pardon?
Oh, is that your thing? Underground
Maybe
creatures.
those are the scary things for me. Maybe because I live in London and the tube just. Well, this one was set on the tube. One that was set in the tube, and it's
Oh,
about a woman who's like drunk, and then she wakes up, and the underground station is like empty, and then she gets dragged into the tube, and there's like this creature that does experiments underground. I don't even know what it was called, but it
oh,
was. I remember it being creepy as someone who takes the tube like regularly. That is, yeah,
I love that. I want to watch that. Sounds good.
yeah. I
Okay.
can't remember what it's called
Um, I'm so sorry. Totally veered off the book.
though. It's from a horror film.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it is Hollow weekend.
It is
So,
Halloween weekend.
yeah. Do you have any plans?
No, I don't have any plans actually. I normally do because it's an Irish holiday, so it's one I grew up with a lot. Got to scare. Is it scaring the pixies away so they don't take the souls when they're on their journey to Tirnanog? Is just the point of it. Like you're supposed to dress up to scare the people who want to like
Is that
everyone.
what it is?
Everyone who's died that year is traveling to Tirnanog, which is like the afterlife, and you have to they want to take the souls, so you have to try and scare them away so they won't, so the souls can get through. That's why you've got to dress up scary. You
Oh,
can't just dress up as whatever. You've got to be scary.
I mean, I
You
is
would have
was
seen.
this not scary enough?
Yeah. Were you doing anything?
I just went out with some friends last night.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't dress up. I this is You know, this is the only costume I have, and I was not gonna go out like this.
But it must be
For the YouTube,
for the
I
YouTube home.
will, but not but not in my real life.
Wasn't it the anniversary there of the thing that happened in Itaewon last year?
Yes, yeah. So I was still a bit iffy about going out,
Mm.
but last night was really, really safe. There were so many police cars and ambulances at the ready, so it was much more surveillanced and safe than it was last year. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, that was a yeah, really sad moment.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I did have some questions for you. Some
Okay.
some general spooky questions. Um,
Um,
what character did you hate the most?
did I hate the most? Um, I don't know if I really hated. Maybe Becky. I was like, stop crying. Like, pull yourself together. That was a bit. Like, again, I don't know if it's because I'm Irish. Like in terms of my heritage, I have Irish family, and we're not like. It's a bit of like catch yourself on. We go like that kind of vibe. We don't abide something
Yes.
very much, and I can't. I struggle with self pitying characters a lot of the time. So, who did you hate?
Um, I think I hated Rosario the most. I think
Mm.
it was just like the greatest betrayal by the end. I was just like, wow, what? I just been like reading all these like books on motherhood, that's why, and I was just like, damn, that's evil and like weird, like
Mm.
gross if it happened.
Yeah.
Like what would you do? Do you think she would love Gaspar if Juan went into his body?
Well, she'd
Like
love
what
him.
is that?
Yeah, but how?
Th-
What would it mean? Yeah.
Love. I'm not gonna expand on love, but yeah, like what
I don't
does
think
one do?
I don't think she could bring herself to be intimate with him. That would be disgusting. Even if you thought it was your husband. But yeah, that does bring up all those questions we were saying about like what is you? Is it your body? Is it your spirit? Like what part of you is you? And also we
Yeah,
found out at the end that like when Juan went into Gaspar, Gaspar was still there. So um yeah.
yeah, so confused, but okay. Yeah, um, yeah, well, I mean, all of them were kind of unlikable, but
Mm,
um, yeah, I think yeah, it was the betrayal for me. I thought that was really interesting. Um,
mm.
okay, and then my other question was, did you enjoy the sort of the exposition, the coming of age portion? Like, what portions or what parts of the book did you like best, or you felt like was best rendered?
Um I did enjoy the coming of age. Um I thought it was a bit overlong at times, particularly when they're even younger, like when they're all four of them together. I enjoyed them going into the house, but I felt like there was a lot of like, oh, I've lost a dog, and that sort of thing that felt like unnecessary. And then also, like as I said earlier, I was more interested in like Pablo than Gaspar in terms of the coming of age story. And Victoria's barely like she's barely mentioned, but yeah, I was more interested in Pablo's aspect of that. And I thought it was interesting the protests and stuff. But I felt like it just wasn't this book. Like it was interesting, but it could have been a different book. Like it didn't feel necessary for the plots or any of this book. Like we could have got to the same point without having to go through so much, I thought. And also like it all felt like it was really close together because there was a coming of age as well of one in London. Like they were one after the other. And so it felt like it was like it had been building this tension and then we had a lull and then it built it up again and then we had another lull and it was just like yeah, I felt like it didn't work within this book, but it was still well done for what it was, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah, No,
What about you?
agreed. Like yeah, I enjoyed the coming of age bits. Stuff could have definitely been cut out, but like yeah, I thought that was going to be sort of the entire book, the coming of
Mm,
age aspect. So I was kind of surprised when sort of these other elements came in. And yeah, it just felt like a different book. And I think I'll still stand by saying that like it just felt like many different short stories
mm,
just, smashed together. Um, and given that this is like her first book, like her first novel,
mm.
um, it quite ambitious, but you still see that she's like still writing from um, the short story mindset.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I think like if it had been several different novels, I think I would have enjoyed them. I'll
Yeah,
be
because
honest.
Gaspar doesn't have powers anyway, so you could just take the occult out of his book and do something else with him.
Exactly. Yeah. I was reading up on or watching some interviews with her, and I don't think there will be a sequel. Um, but I there's just still like a bunch of questions that I have about like the order and just everything. But there's no sequel in mind. Um, I wouldn't imagine how that would work.
Yeah.
Would it be like two giant books? But yeah, she's sort of done thinking about this world, and right now she's working on short stories again, which
Okay.
is interesting. Yeah,
Mm.
so she wrote the novel, and she's done. Back to short stories.
Well, yeah. I mean, she wrote basically like two novels, so she's can take a break for a while.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, did I ask what's the scariest book you've read?
You did ask me that. I don't know.
Okay,
Was the answer to
okay.
that. I'm not really. I told you that some made me uncomfortable, but yeah, I'm not really. I haven't read a lot. And I find like I tried to read thrillers that people recommend and like horror that people recommend, and I find myself like more caught up in plot holes or like I don't know, not liking the writing than I do particularly horrified by them. I need to find the horror that works for me. I think because I found stuff, but it's
Yeah,
mostly creepy. Like I love Our Wives Under the Sea is horror apparently, but it's not. It's much more like sad and slow and uncomfortable than it is like scary, scary.
yeah. Has reading this made you want to read um or still try to understand like what kind of horror reader you are?
Yeah.
You're still looking for the niche.
Yeah, well, because I did enjoy like the haunted house and the body horror of this, so I think that that is a direction to go in. I just need something that's more like I think shorter. I think short horror is going to be the way that works the most. I think.
Yes, yes. That's yeah, definitely short horror.
Hmm.
But yeah, I although I will say Stephen King's books, they're quite long.
Yeah,
They're quite long. But
but you can recommend them.
they're whole universes, I think.
Mm.
So I think the character investment and time that you put into it, and also all the horror stuff, it's all well done. I think he
Okay.
like creates very well-rounded books. Have you done a Stephen King?
No, no, I've never read Stephen King.
Any desire?
I don't know. I've just heard that he's like not a great bloke. That kind of makes me just like less interested. Just like, do I need to read another misogynist? Do I? Is it like it's like
True,
if I
true.
already like someone who turns out to be a misogynist or whatever, I'm like, well, that's a whole situation. But if I just don't have to go there, then it's a bit easier. Just avoid them.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Plenty of more books to read.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think I need recommendations. What would you recommend?
As a first Stephen King book, ooh, um, actually, The Shining,
Okay.
because it's less about um, it's more psychological and about trauma and depression, more so than it is horror, I think. It's still pretty terrifying, but it's yeah. When I read that, I realized like, wow, this is really good. Um, it is also a lot of fun.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's the one that's
There's some
set in
pretty
Derry, isn't it? But obviously it's not Derry, Northern Ireland. But I just imagine
mm-hmm.
them all with like Derry accents, which I think would make it much more funny than scary.
Right,
Like,
right.
it's just the
Um,
kid being like, "Come here to me" in a Derry accent. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, those are good. Pet Cemetery is fun.
Mhm.
Um,
Was it this book where they were referencing
yeah.
Pet Sematary? Or was it a different book? No, that was the Bee Sting. Different book. I was reading it the
Although
same.
I will say there were a couple of mentions of like I loved all the pop culture references that were
Mm.
like mentioned throughout the book. Um, I think she has like a really fine appreciation for a lot of her elements, media and stuff that I think like rounded out this book. Um, but yeah, again, I she does like write from a very cinematic eye.
Mm.
Yeah, but yeah. Um,
Is that all of your questions? Are you done? Or have you got more?
I think I asked all of them without
Okay,
realizing.
that's great.
Yeah,
Well done.
yeah, yeah. I think we did good. Oh, what are
Yeah.
you doing for Halloween on the actual day?
On the actual day, I'm working. So I go to work. Um, yeah, I don't have any. I'm going to the theatre actually. I'm going out to the theatre, but it's not a Halloween thing. It's called Untitled Fuck Miss Saigon play. About
What?
so it's about Miss Saigon as like Orientalist and like a racist depiction of Vietnamese people, and so it's like a like breaking the fourth wall kind of look at the Vietnam War and also the look at the Vietnam War in media. And it's a play, and it's supposed to be a comedy as well. So we'll see. Well,
Fascinating. Sounds great.
what about
Yeah.
you? Any plans for Tuesday?
Also working.
Also working.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'll probably be filming a wrap up that day as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But no plans. I did all my fun stuff this past weekend.
I don't think.
So,
Well, I think we'll just turn all the lights off and pretend we're not home as well, so that children don't come to the door.
are there still trick-or-treaters out there?
Oh yeah, yeah. Generally, if you put a pumpkin in front of your house, that means that children can come knock at your door.
I was gonna say, there's still children out there? There's still
Yeah,
children out in
maybe
the
not in
world? Well,
Korea.
like back yeah, yeah, it's a bit different here. People don't
You've
go
got birth rate issue.
trick-or-treating, sadly.
That's the birth rate
Yeah,
issue, isn't there?
yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
no, like even back home, I
Mm.
like there are no more kids. Like back home in LA, there's no more kids in
There's
the
no kids,
neighborhood.
or in general. There must be children in LA. There must be.
I mean, like every year it's just like there's less
You're
and
in the
less of them. Yeah. So every year, um, I think lately we've just done the like leave the bowl of candy
Mm.
out with the little sign that says take one, but of course, people take more than
Well, you can
one.
do that in California because it won't be pissing now. But more of an issue here. So many of my Halloween costumes had to involve an umbrella, like as a child,
An umbrella?
because it's pissing down and you're walking around from house to house. Like
Got it. Got it.
face paint
Yeah.
appears down your face. It's yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, are there any questions in the chat? Is there anyone here?
A couple of people here, allegedly, but they're very quiet. Does anyone have anything they want to say?
Okay. Yeah. Don't be shy. Ooh, I loved when she was like sort of investigating stories and there were sort of these like massive pits of bodies. That was supposed to be like in reference to like how the dictatorship had like disappeared,
Hmm.
they're so called, and it's like the disappeared political victims
Mm.
uh under the dictatorship that I thought was interesting. Um,
They throw people out of planes. That's what they were famous for, isn't it?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, and dumping them in the water, I believe
Mm.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Maybe we want to watch Evita because they kept talking about Iran.
right, right. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. If there's no questions in the chat and you don't have any more questions for me, I think we should wrap this up because it's late where you are.
That is right. I have work very early in the morning.
Mhm.
Any final words, final thoughts on our
I
shared
think we
night?
managed to
Why
talk.
should people read this book?
Why should I read this book? I think there are moments of really good, creepy body horror and some real tension. If you're into like haunted house, occulty things, and there is a big section that is like 60s occult, which I thought was quite like campy and fun as well, which we've not mentioned. Like David Bowie turns up in here a few times, and like the Rolling Stones, and I thought that those like name drops were quite fun. And yeah, it's really readable. Like for such a giant, what is it like? 700-page book, you can get through it really, really fast. Like compared to some of the other books that I've read for this year, it's very readable, very page-turnery. If you want like a fun, plotty, ready book that has some creepy darkness in it, like you can get through the other bits. I promise. Yeah. Do
Yeah,
you have anything
yeah.
to
I
say?
was actually surprised.
Mm,
Yeah, I was actually surprised by its readability. It's like it's a lot of fun
mm.
when you get through like the very creepy moments. It's yeah. Do you think this is uh a good starting point for Mariana's work?
I would start with short stories personally, partly because I like them more, but also because they are shorter, they're faster. You will get a taste for whether you enjoy her kind of horror if you read the short stories first. Um, so yeah, that's definitely, unless you're like, I only read novels, then I would go for the short stories first. I know some people prefer like huge chunky books in general. Um, it's not us, but it's some people. So
Yeah, yeah. No, but yeah, I'm really excited to take a look at her short stories after
yeah,
this because
I
I
find I
do,
really, really like them.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think you talked about it in a wrap up and I was like, ooh,
Yeah.
fun. Yeah. But yeah. Well, thank you, Roisin.
Thank
This
you
was
for
such
having
a
me. I really
delight.
appreciate it. It was great fun having you here. And thank you for powering through
Yeah.
some page book when you're a short story, short novels kind of person. I appreciate it. Getting out of your comfort zone. And everyone
Hmm.
else, our next book for the Big Book Club is Babel, which we will be probably talking about end of December, early January. And I'm reading that with Doz. So if you want to join us for that, I will keep you informed on my channel when that is live show is happening. But everyone's been talking about Bagel, so even if you haven't read it, I'm sure you have an opinion. So yeah, thank you for coming, thank you for watching, and thank you for joining me here today, Nate. Thank you very much. Say bye. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, sorry. I can't end the stream. There we go.